And welcome back to the Clear Jets podcast. Your host, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. It is finally draft week. Michael, I don't know about you, but it seems like there's considerably less hype around this draft class than in previous years. Maybe it's because the Jets aren't picking as high. Maybe it's because of the Rodgers trade situation hanging over this entire offseason. But do you feel the same way? I mean, it doesn't even feel like the draft is 5 days away.
I totally agree. Just throughout this whole lead up to the draft the past few months, whether it was the combine process or, this whole month of April, which is supposed to be that, lead up of getting hyped up for the draft, it hasn't really felt the same as it has in recent years. I feel like every single year we come into the draft and we say, this is the most important draft for the Jets in franchise history. But this year, it's kind of the first time we're not even close to saying that. And that's not to say it's not important, but just in terms of hype and all that going into the draft, it doesn't feel quite as big as previous years. And I think maybe the Rodgers trade has kind of been a dark cloud looming over it. Not a dark cloud, because it will be a good thing for the Jets when it happens, but just the uncertainty that it's kind of created in terms of where are the Jets picking, and is it going to be done before the draft, is kind of distracted from maybe some of the draft scouting and preparation, and just fans getting in general hyped up for it. So maybe it's been that. Maybe it's just the fact that the Jets aren't as reliant on the draft as they have been in previous years, like needing to nail it to, turn the franchise around. Obviously, they still need to do well with it. Every team does, but it's just the Jets have more pieces in place where they're not as desperate to absolutely need to nail the draft. So I think
Right.
there are a lot of reasons that it's a little bit different.
Although I would argue that the Jets are at a interesting cross section of being a really young team, but then also a team that is making a push to bring in a veteran quarterback and trying to go for a Super Bowl. And so this draft being the bridge between those two seasons is really important if you wanted to, sustain some success after Rodgers. We all know that, if you have success in the draft, if you have success in April, you're going to be able to build long-term success in the NFL. And that's why the Jets have been so bad recently. Douglas's first draft here, not so great. Douglas's second draft here, also not so great, but, did land AVT, and, he's been a pretty damn good player when he's been on the field. Last draft, amazing. And this draft, it's a real opportunity for the Jets to really bolster their offensive line. I think that's what pretty much everybody's expecting them to do, assuming they make the pick at 13, and then assuming they'll make one of the picks in the second round. Like you said, the Rodgers trade hanging over the entire draft has kind of made it hard to forecast what exactly the Jets should do, because it's possible the Jets won't even be picking 13th. I would say it's pretty likely they'll pick in round one, though. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a pick swap. We've been talking about it the entire offseason. I know we've been slacking a little bit on these podcasts, but we will be doing what we've done the last few drafts and have a pod come out Thursday night after day one, previewing day two and talking about the first night. We'll have one come out Friday night after day two and previewing day three, and then another one that comes out Saturday night. So we'll have three other podcasts this week previewing and discussing the draft. But Michael, when you talk about the Rodgers trade and how it's kind of impacting how we can forecast what the Jets will do, is it finally going to happen? I mean, we got the Rappaport tweet today that the Jets and Packers have started to talk again. Do you think this is going to push all the way to the 11th hour? Is it possible it pushes past the draft, and at which point the Packers would just wait until June 1st to trade him? I mean, before we get into the prospects and talking about what the Jets need to do this week, what are your thoughts on the Rodgers trade? I know there's not too much more to say that we haven't already, but how are you feeling?
Well, really, ever since those first few days went by after Rodgers made his announcement on the Pat McAfee show, and it became clear that these two teams weren't close and this was going to drag out. Ever since then, I have kind of felt like this would go up to the draft, more so than, maybe happens on a random day in late March or mid-April. I did kind of look at the draft as that date that would kind of, as the next hard deadline that would maybe force these teams to get together and hammer out a trade. And it looks like it's trending that way. I think the Rappaport tweet was a very good sign, just because specifically that it was him, because it's really felt like even he, and he's maybe the best NFL insider right there with Schefter, but they've been it's a debate there. I mean,
I probably would agree with that. I think Schefter was the pound for pound king for a while, but I think Rappaport might have overtaken him. He's outscooped him a few times this offseason.
I think Rappaport has him beat in some categories, like spelling consistency. Like Schefter has to edit
I
half
don't know
his
about that.
tweets. I think he does. I don't know. That
Rappaport, I have tweet notifications for both, and Rappaport deleted a
The
fair
only thing
share
I'll
of
say
his
about
first
Rappaport
attempts.
is this is very frustrating to me, but I feel like he's started to tweet a lot more about non-football stuff, and half of his tweets are quote tweets of some random thing that I don't care about.
You sound like the people in the replies of your tweet.
That's true.
They
That
get upset
doesn't
when you
apply to
start
me.
talking
I don't
non-Jets.
talk about non-Jets. Maybe
We'll
in the
see.
past at some point,
I've seen.
but anyway, that's way
You are
off
currently doing
topic.
this podcast in a full Knicks.
I don't tweet
You look
about
like
the
Spike
Knicks
Lee right
though. I
now.
do look like Spike Lee. I've got my Obi Toppin jersey on. I was going wild
Big
today
win.
watching Game 4, but that was way off topic. What a tangent. But I think
We're back.
okay, I was saying that Rappaport, the fact that he tweeted it, I think is a good sign because he and Schefter being the top insiders, even they have felt so just blocked out of this saga, not really knowing anything. But the fact that, he is sensing some optimism and the fact that the teams are talking again is, I guess, a sign that, it's getting out that the trade is coming closer to a conclusion. So that's promising. I think it'll happen. By the time the draft is over, it will happen. Exactly when? I think that's what's going to be interesting. Will it be prior to the start of the first round, maybe early Thursday? Will it be on the clock on Thursday? Or will it even go
God,
into Friday? Because
please
if there's
no.
no first round pick involved, it could absolutely go into Friday. Maybe the Packers want to see how the board shakes out, and maybe they just take it to that 11th hour and uh, take it all the way up to the Jets' first pick of that second
This
round. So which
this
do you
feels
think is more
like
likely?
this feels like that
Yeah,
2016 offseason with Fitzpatrick.
I
Obviously, a
hated that.
lot
This
better.
is just like that, but just every
It's a lot
single
better,
day
but
refreshing.
yeah,
But
they
Ryan
kept
Fitzpatrick
feeling
and
like,
Aaron
okay,
Rodgers, apples and oranges.
yeah, I think the prize should be a lot better. But yeah, I remember that offseason. It kept being like any week now it's going to happen. It just kept pushing and pushing. Then training camp is the final deadline. And he still hasn't. But yeah, it ultimately wasn't worth it in 2016. But hopefully, things are a little different this time around. I guess. Well, actually, you asked me a question on Rodgers. I think I think it'll happen this week before the draft. I would say draft eve, maybe Wednesday.
Okay.
What is the benefit to waiting until? You think is it possible that the Packers have their eyes on somebody, and if he's available at 13, they have a package, and they would want to do that, and then if he's not at 13, they have a different package where
I mean, it could be
there's
that, but I don't know if that matters too much because would the prospects on the board be that have that much of an effect to where you would bypass these picks
if
entirely?
they love if they really like somebody and they feel like he would have to fall to 13, but they probably couldn't get him at 15, then maybe they have a package on the table that would be a pick swap where they get 13, the Jets get 15, and then if he's not available, it's a different package. That's of similar value. Maybe I don't know. I mean, spitballing here. I don't really know what
Yeah, I
the
mean,
whole
I
up
don't
could
I
be,
don't
but if
think there
it
would be much benefit for that. I think it would just be taking it down to the absolute last minute would be the only
yeah,
reason that
just
would
the
happen.
drama.
Yeah.
I think it's just the drama, the scripts. We needed something to talk about this entire month. So if the Rodgers trade got done when
Yeah,
he
the
went on
script writers
McAfee, we'd
knew
have
this wasn't an intriguing draft class, so that's why they
yeah.
came up with this whole
They need a
thing to
story.
keep us busy.
All right, Michael, let's talk some draft stuff. We'll start with the Jets roster though, in terms of needs and stuff they'll be looking to target this weekend. As I alluded to earlier, it feels like this draft is the draft to target the offensive line. Joe Douglas gets to prove his worth as an offensive line scout and really just inject some youth into this unit. Obviously, Douglas has targeted the offensive line a fair bit in his tenure here. The results haven't necessarily been there. Obviously, last year a little bit better, but injury concerns with Elijah Vera Tucker, Mekhi Becton has yet to stay healthy. Some hit or miss free agency moves. And at this point, if they're able to get a tackle that they like at 13 and get a center that they like at with one of those picks in round 2, you're looking at a much improved offensive line with a high ceiling and a great outlook for the future of the trenches. So is that what you're expecting when we look at this roster? It's like this is the Joe Douglas offensive line draft, most likely.
I think so, yeah, because as he's already invested quite a bit into the offensive line, as we know, but even despite all that, it remains the, I think, biggest weakness going into this draft, and it probably was going into the offseason. And they obviously haven't really done too much to fix it here in the offseason so far. So I think they are focused on this draft as the avenue they're going to use to improve the offensive line. And as much as it's about improvement, it's just about security and depth because, like, in a perfect world, everyone would love for Mekhi Becton to play 17 games and be as dominant as we all know he could be. When we watched him in 2020 and he was throwing defenders all over the field, we would all love for that. And I think the Jets would equally love it. But you also have to be realistic and look at the fact that he's played 2 full quarters in the last 2 years and just realize that it's hard to rely on him until he proves that he can be relied upon. So I do think tackle will be that target in the first round. We'll talk more about different scenarios based on who falls, who's available, who's not. Could they move? Depending on how the board falls. But I do think that'll be the primary target. And then you go into round two, I think you shift your focus to center where they still don't even have a starting caliber player yet. So I do think this will be the O-line draft for Joe Douglas.
The only thing that could shake it up, I think, is probably receiver. I mean, it's possible they could really go with a wild card like defensive tackle or maybe one of these tight ends. But I think the only thing that would really, you know, cause Joe Douglas to not take an offensive tackle, I think, would be if he really falls in love with, a guy like Jackson Smith-Njigba at 13. I think when the Jets traded Elijah Moore, we all assumed the Jets were going to sign OBJ. It sounds like the Jets thought they were getting OBJ as well. And so the Jets are in a position now where their top receivers, Garrett Wilson, he's great. I'm expecting a big year out of him. They brought in Allen Lazard. He's great. Nice, big-bodied, run-blocking receiver. And then they have Mecole Hardman, who I think can, fill that Braxton Berrios void, can be a nice gadget guy. And then look, if you lose a Garrett Wilson, he goes down, you do have somebody with some explosive potential to kind of insert into this offense. And then that leaves you with Corey Davis, who I think we had assumed that he would be going to reunite with Matt LaFleur in this trade package. The Packers could use a veteran receiver. It's relatively good bargain. The Jets could free up some cap space. But without getting OBJ, do you think Corey Davis is a Jet? And then how does that impact the Jets' draft strategy? In terms of taking a receiver at 13 or maybe on day 2 or 3.
I think you're right that wide receiver is the main position that could shake everything up because you look at the wide receiver depth chart and it's an interesting spot that they're in now without having gotten Odell Beckham. And not that they should have signed him to that deal. I think they were definitely smart to not sign him to what Baltimore ended up signing him to. But, without him in the fold, you look at the depth chart now and like you said, Allen Lazard is a good depth piece that they've added. We're expecting a big leap from Garrett Wilson at number 1. Hardman's in there, bringing that gadget ability and a little bit of speed and explosiveness down the field. And then you still have Corey Davis. But I think they just lack that 1-2 punch that a lot of other contenders have. I think the depth is good. And overall, this is a above average wide receiver unit. But you have one star, and then you have a bunch of other guys who are good depth pieces, but like, do you have Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin? Like, there are a lot, and in your own division, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. There are a lot of teams that have 2 guys to where, one star could get hurt. You have another really good guy to step in for him. And when they're both healthy, they could bounce off of each other, draw coverage away from one another, and you always have a great player to go to. The Jets don't really have that. As good as their depth is, I think they still could really use that, especially with Rodgers coming in. And that's something that Rodgers hasn't had in a pretty long time. It was really the Devontae Adams show the past few years. Obviously, this year he didn't have any studs or, high-level studs. He had Lazard, but in terms of, like, star players, he didn't have that. So I think that's something that they're, pursuing. Odell Beckham shows that they have potential interest in having that, bona fide number 2 guy. So if they love JSN and he's there at 13, they don't like how the tackles have sort of fallen, then I wouldn't totally rule it out. So it will be interesting to see if they value it that much.
Yeah, and it really, I think I'll push back on you a little bit because I think the Jets' idea, if they do roll with Corey Davis, Garrett Wilson, Lazard, and Hardman, is that they have Breece Hall as the other part of their 1-2 punch. And yeah, you can't count on a guy coming off of an ACL surgery, but I think having a Hall of Fame veteran quarterback in Aaron Rodgers and then having a bunch of veterans around him outside of these young guys like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, but having Lazard, Davis, Hardman, and even the tight ends who didn't really get utilized as much by Zach Wilson last year, but the Jets still have some talented tight ends. And hell, it's a great tight end class. It really wouldn't surprise me if the Jets take another one. And so I agree that I am slightly concerned. I would certainly be excited if they take JSN at 13. How I envision this Jets offense really does come down to what they do at receiver, though, because if they keep Davis and they have these big bodied blocking receivers between him and Lazard, and then they can give Garrett Wilson some slot reps on third downs, they can get the tight ends involved. That to me, signals, and it is in line very much with what Robert Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett have talked about in terms of getting back to a run first play action game. The Jets have coaches coming from Tennessee. That type of offense with nice run blocking receivers, getting the tight ends involved, a lot of 12 personnel, running the ball with Breece Hall, and then using the play action to get Rodgers, with those deep shots. That makes a lot of sense, and that's exciting to me. But I agree that if you lose the dynamic threat of Garrett Wilson, you're going to be relying on Mecole Hardman to fill that role. It's also possible that they could take somebody later in the draft. There are explosive athletes. There are great receivers that fall every year into day 3, and they could take somebody who has those explosive traits, draft him on day 3, and have him, back up Garrett Wilson, be the 5th or 6th receiver. And then if something were to happen, maybe months from now, when we're into November, if Garrett Wilson were to go down, you can rely on a guy to come in and bring some sparks to the offense. I think that is probably more likely when you look at it from a need perspective and saying this Jets team needs to invest in the offensive line. I would much rather, from a pure needs perspective, and we do this every draft where we look at it like a shopping list and
Right.
try to just plug needs. But when you look at this Jets roster, you say, look, we got a 39-year-old quarterback back there. We want to be able to run the ball. Both the head coach and the GM have talked about the importance of winning in the trenches. Let's go ahead and attack the offensive line these first 2 rounds and fill out the line. And, Corey Davis is a very solid veteran receiver, and Aaron Rodgers will lift all the weapons around him. But at the same time, it's pretty fun to go get an explosive receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who might very well be the best player. And we know Joe Douglas is going to look at it as who's the best player on my board, and it's possible that could be a receiver. So it is a fascinating dynamic to watch. Is there anything else? It seems like it'll just be one of the tackles or JSN. Could you see a tight end like I mentioned? Could you see another receiver like Jordan Addison? Could you see a defensive player? Or to you, is it just tackles, JSN, or bust?
I think it's pretty unlikely that it's anything other than tackle or the outside chance at a receiver. I mean, some people have talked about maybe Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle from Georgia. He could potentially fall because of some off the field stuff, but that seems pretty unlikely. And there's that. And then there's Kalijah Cansey, the defensive tackle from Pittsburgh. He's been a fast riser, and just because of the type of player he is, he's a very good athlete, amazing pass rushing prospect. Defensive tackle that could potentially fit into what the Jets like, but he is pretty undersized and he's still in the 20s of most big boards, so I don't think I see that. So I think it's tackle, or do they love Jackson Smith-Njigba enough, if he's even there, to take him over the tackles, depending on how that board falls. So I don't see anything other than those 2 positions.
Do you think JSN fits? Kind of going back to what I'm saying earlier about if it's Corey Davis in this current Jets receiver room, it kind of projects a different offense than if the Jets were to trade Corey Davis away and bring in another, slender, fast, explosive receiver like JSN, but a guy who probably is going to have to play out of the slot. You'll give Garrett Wilson more outside reps. I mean, they're 2 completely different offenses. Does that factor into how you see this playing out that much?
I think he would fit in pretty well, because you look at the lineup right now and they do kind of lack a more traditional slot receiver, and Lazard plays a lot of slot. I think as it stands right now, he would probably play the most slot snaps, and he's pretty good at it. Like, he has good slot traits. He's very good on slants. He uses his big body to box out defenders on those slants and make himself a good third down weapon.
Put him in
So
motion blocked like an H-back.
Right, there's that as well. So he does have good slot traits. He's experienced with it. And even Corey Davis can do a little slot. Garrett Wilson can do some of it. So I think there will be a lot of interchangeability there. But I think it would be good to have a go-to slot guy who kind of is, the person who would play that role the most. And I think Smith-Njigba could fit that hole for them. And that's not to say he can't play outside as well, because he definitely can do that. But it would just add to the interchangeability of this whole lineup, because I think the Jets have a lot of guys who could line up in both roles and in just different spots across the formation. Like you said, even put Lazard, Davis, these big-bodied receivers at H-back and these types of positions where they could block. So I think Smith-Njigba would fit in. I think he would give them the route running and some of those skills that they don't necessarily have in the big bodied players of Lazard and Corey Davis. And they do have Hardman in the mix as well, but I personally don't. I know the Jets have said they want to explore his route running and all that, and we'll see what happens. But I think just based on his contract, realistically, he's just here to be the gadget guy that he was in Kansas City, the occasional deep shot, and the fourth, fifth receiver. I don't think we're going to see him expand too much. So, and that's just me
If Garrett
personally.
goes down though,
But
if
like,
Garrett goes down
yeah,
though,
Garrett
who's
Wilson goes
filling in?
down. That's the thing. Like, is Hardman the guy who's going to step up and take some of those reps? I don't know if that's totally ideal. So there is appeal to the idea of drafting JSN. It's not something we should rule out or be surprised by if he's available and they end up picking him.
All right, well, let's look at the tackles because I agree that it's probably more likely they'll take a tackle than JSN. Plus, I'm not even sure JSN will be there at 13. It's definitely possible he could go to 12 to the Texans or to another team picking ahead of them. When you look at these tackles, let's look at it from a Joe Douglas perspective. I mean, I guess what's the quick primer on the three? I guess you could say four if you include Darnell Wright, but Paris Johnson from Ohio State, Peter Skoronski from Northwestern, and Broderick Jones from Georgia. Those three seem to be the tackles that have been in the top 15 of every mock since January. Darnell Wright has also been kind of hanging around there, and he's an option, especially if those three guys are gone. But what's the quick scouting report on those four guys, and how do you see them fitting in terms of what Joe Douglas and this Jet staff is looking for at offensive tackle?
Yeah, I think Skoronski is interesting because to me, from what I've watched, and I'll admit I haven't watched every single game with these guys, gone all the
Really?
way
Come on.
down. I know,
Fraud.
disappointing. I'm an absolute fraud for not watching every single snap. But nevertheless, from what I've seen, he does look like the most technically sound. He just has great hands. And he is a guy who was very successful at tackle at Northwestern. But you look at that arm length, which is something that everyone looks at tackle. It was enough to knock AVT from playing tackle in college for the Jets moving him at guard. You look at that arm length, he's at 32 and a quarter inches, fourth percentile for tackles. A lot of people think he should be a guard because of that. And his play style just kind of lends him to more of an interior sort of player, a little more gritty, phone booth type of guy. So there are those questions. Can he play tackle at the NFL? Well, I think he can definitely play it, but it's just, would he be better as a tackle or a guard at the NFL? So Skoronski's a great offensive line prospect, but it's just the length questions of can he play tackle. And then Broderick Jones, most people consider him like the upside guy. He's got the traits and
The
maybe
Becton
the,
of this
the best,
class.
yeah, like in terms of just the ceiling, but also needing maybe some more work and a little bit more projection. And then I see Paris Johnson kind of in between them. Maybe not as high of a ceiling as Broderick Jones, but a little more solidified as a tackle prospect, as a guy who could play tackle in the NFL and should have a high floor compared to Skoronski. So those seem to be the top three guys. And then Darnell Wright also gets into the mix sometimes. I know he has his fans, people who do want to see the Jets target him with that 13th pick. But it'll be interesting because you look at the top of the draft, and there is a chance that none of those top three guys, if you consider Jones, Paris Johnson, Skoronski to be the top three, there's a chance that none of them are there. There are some teams at the top of the draft who could take tackles. I think the Eagles and the Bears, or back to back Bears and the Eagles, 9 and 10, both of them have a good chance of taking a tackle. And prior to that, Raiders absolutely could do it. Falcons, that's in play for them. Titans at 11. So there's a good shot that three tackles at least are off the board before 13. It could happen. And at that
What
point,
what do you think they pivot to? Yeah.
yeah, like Darnell Wright, I think, is a big X factor here. If three tackles are off the board and he's not one of them, do they like him enough to take him at 13? Because you could never go off of the internet draft community group think like, oh, Darnell Wright's the 25th ranked guy, so he'd be a reach at 13. The NFL teams' boards are always so much different, or they can be different than what the consensus on the outside is. Some teams will like a guy a lot more than the internet thinks. Like, look at that Cole Strange pick from the Patriots. Sometimes it'll be the same. Sometimes they'll like him a lot less. So you don't know. But
Right.
looking at Darnell Wright, and he had a good combine. He measured well, has good film. His stock's been trending up. he is a guy who could potentially be seen as worthy of that 13th pick. And maybe the Jets just take him there, but he also could not be seen as worthy of that 13th pick. We just don't know. So
I
they
think
could take him there, or they could trade down, maybe go into a sweet spot where they like taking him better. But what do you think?
I think if we learned anything from last year, Daniel Jeremiah's big board is generally a good thing to
Yeah,
look at if you're trying to get a sense of where Joe Douglas's head might be on some of these prospects, considering they were pretty identical last year. If you listen to their reports, and Jeremiah has Darnell Wright as his 15th best player and his second best tackle, so it really wouldn't surprise me if Wright is
yeah,
taken, even if a guy like Broderick Jones is still on the board. I think that the question with him is one, he's a right tackle, which is fine. It sounds like Becton wants to play left tackle, and they have Dwayne Brown. Maybe that's a conversation we can hop into in a second. But okay, he's a right tackle, and then I think you do have some scheme fit concerns. It's hard to know exactly what this Jets offense will look like, but you have to imagine it's going to look like what Keith Carter ran in Tennessee in terms of this zone blocking system. Not too different from what the Jets did last year, and they need guys who have good feet. You can get out in space and redirect. And I don't know if that's Darnell Wright, but from what I have watched as an offensive line guru,
right.
I really like what I've seen from him. I watched his film against Will Anderson, and it was extremely impressive. Like you said, I mean, the combine's the underwear Olympics, but he certainly impressed there. I would not hate that pick. I mean, I think part of the reason I'm interested in this draft class for sure, but maybe why it doesn't feel as I haven't obsessed about this draft class as maybe some of the ones in years past is I do trust Joe Douglas's judgment on this pick. Maybe that's maybe I shouldn't, considering he took Becton over Tristan Wirfs in 2020. But whoever the Jets take here at 13, assuming they have, I do think it'll be a tackle. Uh, all four of these prospects are good players, and I think all four of them can come in and they'll make this offensive line better. And I trust the Jets' ability to scout these guys and find the right fit for them. If it were me, it sounds like Paris Johnson, out of all those guys that you talked about, is the most intriguing in terms of the combination of athleticism, technique, upside. But all four of them have something to like. I guess kind of circling back to what I was saying earlier, you were talking about Becton, we're talking about these guys. Where do you see them playing? I mean, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but assuming they take one of these guys, how much do you have to factor in? Okay, it sounds like Becton is pretty dead set on playing left tackle. Maybe he's wrong. If they do take a guy like Paris Johnson, who's played a lot of left tackle at Ohio State, maybe they want to give the rookie, don't want to force the rookie to change positions. There's also the train of thought of, maybe a rookie shouldn't start at left tackle immediately, play him at right tackle like the Lions did with Penny Sewell. How do you see that playing out? I mean, I don't, as I said, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it's something to consider. Where do you see these guys playing if they take one?
Yeah, that'll be the big question. And Dwayne Brown is who makes it interesting because he's been a left tackle his entire career, a very long career. It's been only left tackle, no starts at right tackle. So is he able to break free? I guess it's
Probably
able
not.
slash willing. Does he want to? I mean, I'm sure he could conceivably, but would that go well? Probably not.
Probably
So,
not.
I
No.
mean, he seems pretty penciled in as a left tackle, which means Becton's probably going to have to play right tackle, which, he switched sides at Louisville, and the Jets had him preparing to play it last year. So I think he could take it on and would be capable of doing it. So I think Becton's the guy who's just gonna, even if he is zeroed in on left tackle, I think he's the guy who is gonna have to be ready to play either side and just adapt based on whoever comes in through the draft.
Let's stay on the tackles here for a second. If the Jets somehow don't take a tackle at 13, let's say they take JSN, turning our attention to the second round, I think most people are expecting the Jets to target a center there, considering they don't really have a starting caliber center on the roster. It's a great place to take a center in the draft. It's a good center class, and the Jets should have their pick of the litter at that spot. It's possible one of the top guys could be gone, but they'll be able to land somebody there. But if they don't take a tackle at 13, then I think tackle enters the conversation in the second round. And again, I say we operate under the assumption that the Jets will have one of those second round picks. It's possible they could have both. It's possible they could have neither, but I'll say one. And the other one goes to Green Bay. Are there any tackles that jump out to you, and how do you think the Jets would approach that scenario? And again, trying not to fall too hard into the best player available versus grocery shopping for needs. But it seems like if they go receiver at 13 and they got to choose between tackle and center, Which one makes more sense in the second round when you look at the big board?
Yeah, like you said, we never want to get into that shopping list sort of mode, but if they do skip on tackle at 13, you got to feel like they have to find a way to get it early somehow, some way, right? Because it's hard to imagine them coming out of the draft the way they went into the offseason, getting all the way through the draft without having made a big addition at tackle. Just seems like an enormous risk with the type of season they're going into with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback and wanting to keep him protected for a hopeful Super Bowl run. So it seems like it would be a big risk. You never want to do the shopping list thing, but I think they would have to find a way to get it. I mean, maybe they find a way to trade up into a spot in the first round where they can get a tackle they like at a good value. DeJuan Jones from Ohio State, if they do stay in the second round, is someone who they could maybe stay there and be able to get. He might go earlier than that, but he's interesting because he's definitely the Becton of this draft in terms of the size. I mean, he's 6'8". I think he was 359. He weighed in. Just another one of these guys who has that massive frame, and his production in college was great. You look at some of his stats. I mean, he allowed the lowest pressure rate of any college tackle last year. So he beat out all these other prospects. But teams have concerns about that size. They saw what happened or has been happening with Becton, who was a top pick in 2020, and I think teams are afraid of falling into that same trap. So that's probably why DeJuan Jones doesn't have very high stock relative to some of these other prospects. Teams have concerns about those enormous tackles, but he does have great college production to his name, so he could be interesting. But you can't rule out maybe they like a center better than any of the tackles available in that second round. Could go with John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota if he's there. Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin, Luke Weipler from Ohio State. There are going to be a few options. Steve Avila from TCU, another guy. So that'll be if they. That's the thing about skipping out on a tackle in the first round. You never want to pick for needs. We've said it so many times already in this podcast. But if you don't, it's like there's a chance you could come out of this draft just empty-handed at tackle, and it's a tough position to be in.
Is there any chance something could come out of the blue, like David Bakhtiari in the Aaron Rodgers deal, or maybe the Jets are really high on Max Mitchell? Sounds I saw him. He was at the was it the Rangers game or the Islanders game?
Islanders game, yeah.
He was at the Islanders game, so it seems like he is doing well, and so should. I mean, I don't want to assume anything, but it looks like he should be able to practice this offseason. So maybe they're high on him. Maybe they plan to kick AVT outside. I mean, is there any other outside of taking a tackle at 13, and if they don't take one, is there anything else that could surprise you in terms of what they could do there?
I think one guy they could potentially fall back on is Cameron Fleming, who you actually brought up to me first. He's still a free agent. He started for the Broncos last year under Hackett, and he had a solid season. He was a top half pass protector in terms of his pressure rate, above average. So maybe they have him on speed dial, and they're ready to call him up if the tackles don't fall their way in the draft. But obviously, that's not the most appealing option to be, your only solution at tackle for the whole offseason, but it is a potential fallback. Yeah, I mean, it is going to be a tough situation at tackle if they don't get one with, that first round pick at 13. But at the same time, it's, they might not have one of those guys fall to them, and maybe they don't see them as the best player available. There are avenues where it could potentially go the way where the Jets don't get one of them. So if it does play that way, it will be, let's just say you're going to be crossing your fingers and praying that Mekhi Becton can give you a healthy, great season. And it would be the biggest X factor in the entire roster.
All right, let's get off the tackles here for a minute and just look around the rest of the roster. What are the biggest needs in order? I mean, I think we've talked on tackle, center, and receiver, but there are plenty of other needs that still need to be filled, especially when we look at the defensive side of the ball. Safety, Jordan Whitehead is still on this team, but I had assumed that they would cut him as soon as they brought in Chuck Clark. We'll see what happens, just considering they're both strong safeties. It's possible that maybe they keep both of them. They give Chuck Clark a lot more snaps in the box, and maybe that allows him to keep Whitehead at strong safety and go with a three safety look, and maybe that's Tony Adams at free safety. But one would suggest or assume that the Jets might draft a safety in this draft class. Linebackers also somewhat of a need, considering the Jets haven't brought back Quan Alexander. CJ Mosley's getting up there in age. It's such a crucial position for this defense. And Quincy Williams is a good young player, but still developing. So linebacker is definitely another position they could look at. I mean, defensive tackle. I mean, there are other holes on this team. So how do you kind of, if you're creating that need grocery shopping list heading into this weekend that you're not going to look at and you're only going to judge it by best player available, but if you had to, how are you ranking these needs on this team?
Well, I mean, there are definitely a long list of needs that, maybe they aren't extremely dire as much as they might have been in recent years for the Jets, because they do have so much good top end talent across this roster. But I think the back end of quite a few positions is a little bit weak right now. So I guess if I were to say, well, tackles first. Center, I'd probably put second after that. Maybe center even before that, but we just know that you wouldn't draft a center with the 13th pick, just because they don't even have a starting center. Maybe that's number one, but those are top two. After that, I would say maybe receiver would be third. I mean, would you agree with that, or would you put
Maybe
something
defensive
else?
tackle. It's
Yeah,
hard.
I'm debating receiver versus defensive tackle and linebacker, and free
Yeah.
safeties in that mix.
So any other positions? I mean, I
Because
guess when you look at it,
receiver is just more like the luxury versus free
yeah,
safety. You still need a starter.
yeah,
Even tackle, you still need a starter.
I would say,
Linebacker,
yeah,
you need a third guy.
yeah, I would say defensive tackle and then receiver, but receiver certainly has a high, could definitely raise the ceiling of this offense if they could bring in another dynamic receiver to this offense. When you look at day three, and again, when we do these draft pods towards the end of the week, we'll obviously get much more into the specifics of the day three guys as we see how the board falls and hopefully the Rodgers trade and what the Jets have done. But, I think day three is obviously the time where the scouts shine. You do draft the best players available, but you're also looking to add young players and to build a pipeline at specific positions. And you're not necessarily drafting for need or guys to play immediately, but you look at kind of the long-term needs. And when you look at this roster in terms of long-term needs, positions they could draft, which ones jump out to you in terms of positions they could target on day three?
I think. Well, I think the biggest thing is looking at the way the picks are laying out, because, like you said, most likely one of those second round picks is getting traded, and that leaves you with just the first round pick, one second round pick. And then after that, the Jets won't be on the clock until the fourth round, as it currently stands. So that there are going to be plenty of these big needs that we talked about that will still be there when they get to day three. So I guess let's say the ideal scenario plays out and they do get the tackle in the first round, and then they back it up with a center in the second round. Then I think you go into day three, and you're looking at three defensive positions: defensive tackle, free safety, specifically a free safety over a box safety, and linebacker. I think those are the three you're looking at. And then wide receiver still in play if you can get. I mean, there are so many good
You're
day
missing the
three
obvious one.
receivers in the league,
You're missing the
and
obvious one.
I'm missing the obvious one. Lay it on me,
I
quarterback.
guess quarterback. There you go.
That's in play as well.
I definitely see the Jets drafting a quarterback day three
Yeah.
because Tim Boyle and Zach Wilson as your backups. I think they could definitely take a page out of the Kyle Shanahan playbook and just take a QB late day three, keep drafting them, and maybe you'll find a Brock Purdy or somebody who can, or Mike White. I mean, hell, he developed into a pretty solid backup for the Jets, and if things had played out differently, I think the Jets certainly would have wanted to bring him back. So I would definitely expect the Jets to have found somebody in this class that they feel can come in. Maybe a lower ceiling type of quarterback would make a lot of sense. Somebody who maybe doesn't have all the physical traits in the world, but somebody who they like his processing speed and that they feel that he could come in and, get the timing of this offense down. And also, there aren't many times you're going to have an opportunity to have a young guy learn from Aaron Rodgers. And yes, we're all kind of thinking of that role for Zach Wilson, but it's a good opportunity to draft somebody and stick him in here in, the Aaron Rodgers summer school for QBs. I think that makes a lot of sense for them. And also, you could even look at positions like corner, which we don't think of as a need at all, but look at that corner depth chart. If somebody goes down, it's great that Eccles and Hall have had substantial starting experience. And when you look around the rest of the NFL, how many other teams have fourth and fifth corners who have started as many games as Eccles and Hall? Not that many, but, DJ Reed was a free agent. Michael Carter's going to want an extension soon. Sauce Gardner's amazing, but you never know with injuries. That is another position that if you're not super high on Hall or Eccles, it could really sink your boat. And if there's somebody that they really like, wouldn't surprise me if they took a corner. Again, all these positions are on the table, especially once you get into day 3. But I think quarterback is the one to certainly keep an eye out for. Should I test? Is there any quarterback that comes to mind? I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I know the Jets have
Max
brought in a
Dugan,
few.
they visited with him.
Yeah, they brought him
He's
in.
on
I
the table.
mean,
I agree with you that I think like those high floor kind of less tools kind of quarterbacks are the better ones on day 3. I mean, just off the top of my head, I think when you think about day 3 hit quarterbacks, I think they lean towards that style more so than the guy with a lot of tools. I mean, Kirk Cousins, Purdy, Brady is an obvious one.
yeah,
Derek Carr was not picked in the first round, so that's not day 3, but still not first round. So I think there are guys like that. Even I think maybe Dak Prescott you can throw into that, because I wouldn't say he's like a super athlete toolsy guy. I think he's more of a heady pocket quarterback. So I think that's kind of what you lean towards, guys who don't get picked early because they don't have that super amazing physical upside to where they could be the next Mahomes, Allen, and one of these guys. So they slip down the board, but they can run an offense and at the worst be a good backup quarterback for you. So I agree. I could see them doing that. There's a new coaching staff in here. Nathaniel Hackett, Todd Downing, Keith Carter. They didn't pick Zach Wilson, so maybe they don't like him as the developmental guy, and they could go after their own young quarterback to develop in season
yeah.
for when after Rodgers is done.
Yeah, you mentioned Dugan, O'Connell from Purdue, maybe Stetson Bennett from Georgia. I mean, one of those, I guess low ceiling, high floor types of quarterbacks. I could see them certainly falling for them. Hopefully, Joe Douglas can rebound after the James Morgan travesty of his last developmental quarterback.
Right.
But we'll pin that one on Gase. All right. Well, I guess before we get out of here, I mean, we obviously have to do a mock draft. Is there anything else we want to touch on before we get into the mock draft? I feel like I'm forgetting something. I'm looking at the notes here. Is there anything else you want to
I
hop
think
into?
one quick subject we can talk about, and we touched on it with Cameron Fleming, but I do think it's worth noting the Jets might have some guys on speed dial, veteran free agents that they're kind of waiting to see how the draft plays out, maybe revisit with some of these guys afterwards if the position's still a hole, because there have been some guys who they've met with, potentially had interest, didn't sign. Wasn't the most active free agency period, but I think some of these players, and it's not just the Jets, I think some of these guys who fall through that first, second wave free agency are kind of forced into this position where teams are telling them, just hold off, see how the draft goes. We'll circle back if we still need you. So I think there are a couple of these guys for the Jets. Center with Ben Jones is the obvious one. If the Jets draft a center, Ben Jones isn't coming here to be a backup. I doubt that. Because the Jets also did sign a couple potential backup centers in Tristan Colon and Wes Schweitzer. So I don't think Ben Jones is going to be a backup. But if the Jets don't get a center they like, I think he could absolutely come here and start. So I would put him in there. Al Woods, a defensive tackle. They apparently met with him. If the Jets don't get a D tackle they like, they're going to need a Woods to come in and fill out the depth chart. So he can be added into that. And Quan Alexander, if they don't draft a linebacker they like, Quan at this point may have to settle for coming back to the Jets. He didn't get that the raise that he was looking for, the bigger role with a different team. And then at receiver, I'd throw this guy in there, Randall Cobb. Maybe there's been some communication there if the Jets can't fill out that depth chart the way they would like to. And there's no rush for it either because he knows Hackett, he knows Rodgers, he's a veteran. He doesn't have to be in there early to acclimate with this team. That's a signing that could be made later. So those are a few guys I would throw in the mix there. Players who could get signed after the draft if the Jets don't fill those positions.
Yeah, that's definitely, and especially once the Rodgers trade is finalized, you would wonder if that might push some veterans to finally sign, especially once the Jets figure out their whole cap situation. One more thing before the mock draft. Possibilities of a trade down or other trades. Joe Douglas is certainly going to make some trades this week, but most likely on day 3, moving back, moving up, pick swaps. We know he's hopefully going to make the Rodgers trade, but is there any chance that the Jets could move back from 13 if those tackles are gone, or maybe they don't love one of the tackles or JSN? Is there anything? Could you see that happening?
I think trade down is definitely in play, especially if the tackles kind of shake out that way. Maybe the Jets view it as, let's go down into a spot where maybe we like Anton Harrison or DeJuan Jones, Darnell Wright, whoever it is, we like him in the 20s or the late teens, but we don't like him at 13. So let's get some value back and then go take those guys later. I could definitely see that, especially that 13 feels like a good spot for a trade. Maybe a quarterback slips to that spot. And it also feels like it is right about right before where the run on receivers is expected to start. Maybe JSN goes before the Jets come up. Maybe one of the other top receivers slips into there. Jordan Addison, one of those guys in that tier. It could happen, but looking at some of the draft, mock drafts and consensus, and not that this matters because it gets proven to be nonsense every single draft, but just looking at that, it does seem like it's after that where the receivers will start going quickly. So maybe a team wants to jump the gun on that and get ahead of other teams for a receiver.
Maybe that's the holdup in the Rodgers trade. Maybe the Packers have a package in place if JSN's available at 13, and if he's not, they have a different package where they don't, pick swap 13 and 15. I think that's definitely something to keep in mind. I could totally see the Jets trading down, especially not having any picks in the third round. Having those back-to-back picks in the second round, probably going to trade one, but that I love having that. But giving up that third and that Elijah Moore deal really blows. And in this draft class, especially, it kind of feels like the type of draft class you want more lottery tickets. A quantity over quality a little bit in this draft. Just try to fill out the roster with young guys and hope you can develop them. So yeah, trade down definitely wouldn't surprise me. I think the most likely trade down is some sort of trade when the Jets are on the clock or before the draft or whatever, the Jets swapping to 13 to 15. Does that change the draft in any way? Is the big board look any different at 15 or versus 13? And then perhaps, like you were saying, if the Jets do move further down, is there anybody that we haven't talked about or positions or anything that you think could come into play if the Jets were to move down, maybe even past 15?
I mean, if they did just go to 15, maybe they're comfortable to just, quote unquote, reach for a tackle from that spot. If, maybe we would view it as a reach, maybe they like a guy enough to take him there. Because if a trade like that was made, I think they would feel pretty good about the fact that they got to stay in the first round. So maybe they've just addressed the need anyway. So that would potentially be an option. Trading down to, later in the first round, could they go somewhere other than offensive tackle? I think like we've been talking about a receiver. If they do trade down into the late first round, I think that'll be a much better value spot for a receiver than 13 in terms of non-JSN guys. So that's something worth keeping in mind. But if they did trade down, I do feel like it would be with the idea of just getting one of the maybe lower ranked tackles for a better value.
All right, I think it's time for the mock draft, Michael. The much anticipated mock draft. I think we should do the first two.
You've never heard about one of these before.
Yes.
We're the only people who do mock draft.
The most useless exercise in all of draft season, but it's fun, and I think we've had some good mock drafts in years past. I'm trying to think. I mean, I'm trying to think which
draft. What did we have last year? Did we do a mock draft?
Yeah, we definitely did a mock draft. I think we thought I remember not thinking that they would go for a corner. I remember being like, I love Sauce and he'd be great, but I just don't see the Jets taking a corner at 4. And boy, was I wrong. I remember freaking out day of the draft because Connor Hughes had that tweet about Jermaine Johnson being their main guy at 4.
Yeah.
And then he fell all the way to 26 or whatever. All right, let's do this mock draft. Now thinking about the trade back. Thinking about the trade back, I could even see the Jets doing a pick swap to 15 and then maybe moving back again. I mean, I think stockpiling picks could be a smart move, but I think this is definitely offensive line first. But if you can stockpile picks,
the mock draft database simulator. There's their trade system is pretty good. So I'd say do that one. It'll make it interesting. Add some spice in there.
Okay. I guess we should start with the Rodgers trade. What is the Rodgers trade looking like?
Yeah, I mean,
we've already done this before, but I mean, an updated one.
For the purposes of this, I guess we'd just be losing that. Let's say the first of those 2 second-round picks, 42. Do you think they'd lose anything else in this draft? Maybe fifth round pick? Because I think the meat of it is going to be the conditional pick next year.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. It's possible they could give up a 5th, or that maybe the Jets could, give up a 4th and get a 3rd back or something like that. But to keep things simple, let's just remove one of the second-round picks and for the purposes of this mock draft. If we're trying to actually predict the trade, I would say, yeah, I think you're probably right. It's the conditional pick next year with, parameters around playing time and if the Jets make the playoffs, and then maybe another conditional pick in 2025 if he plays in 2024. But in terms of this draft, I think it's probably just that second round pick. I really wouldn't be surprised though. The pick swap makes a lot of sense, and it kind of makes sense why there's been such a holdup. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. How do you think that would affect the package? Like because if the Jets are going down to 15 in exchange for 13, what would the value of that be? I guess. How would the Packers make up for that? Because that's a move up for the Packers. So,
well, let me look at the draft calculator, but the value from 15 to 13, I would imagine it would be like, it would have to do with maybe that conditional pick.
Got the trade chart here. So 13 to 15, that's 1,150 points for 13. It's 1,050 for 15. So 100-point difference. That's equivalent to the 100th pick, late third round.
Yeah.
So based off of that, the Jets would be giving them a third round pick, basically, is what we're saying here.
Essentially.
So I guess you could do that. Would you still give them the second round pick and the conditional pick next year?
I don't know.
Like, this would qualify as the tack on to that second round pick, or would it take the place of the second round pick? Maybe you could give them the second round pick and the Packers give you another pick back this year.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah. I think so. Maybe the pick swap 13 to 15, the second round pick, a conditional pick next year. I think that should do it. I don't know, but I think the conditions on the trades are really what the deal breaker is going to be, because it's like, does that pick have the possibility to get up to a first rounder? What are the qualifications for that? If the Jets win a Super Bowl and they get a first, right? It's like if it's like the Favre deal, where if the Jets make the Super Bowl, you get a first round pick, by all means, do it. That makes sense. But if it's like Jets make the playoffs, it's a first round pick, right? Or playing time, right? Exactly. That changes a little bit. But I think picks. I'm leaning towards it being a little pick swap for the Packers to take one of those receivers at 13, and
because the Pats at 14, that's a team you'll want to get above,
right? So I think that makes sense. So with that being said, I guess I'll have the Jets picking at 15 to make it interesting, unless we want to keep things simple. But
let's just keep it simple.
All right, fine. Let's ruin all the momentum of that conversation.
Just because I don't know how it would, look in the simulator.
All right. Let's just keep it at 13 then. What are you thinking, Michael? Who's on the board for you?
Do you have a simulator going, or are we speaking? Oh, I'm supposed to be doing one.
Yeah, you. All right. We're just doing one.
Yeah, I'll pull one up as well.
All right, fine.
All right, who's on the board for you?
Well, Skoronski's gone, but Paris Johnson's available. Broderick Jones is available. JSN's available. So pretty favorable board. Darnell Wright's available, obviously. So pretty favorable board, given that only one of the tackle prospects have fallen. If it were me right now, I probably am going with Paris Johnson. But if he's gone and it's JSN versus Jones, it's hard. It feels like every year.
Pretty interesting. Mine's a little different than yours. So both Paris Johnson and Skoronski are gone here. Broderick Jones is here, but Smith-Njigba unfortunately went one pick before to Houston. So I guess this is where it gets interesting, where it comes down to the team's evaluation of the player, because I think we'd all be, just get Jones here, but what if the Jets really don't like him? And especially because he is considered more the projection guy. But then again, JSN is not
his
here.
Athletic traits do fit this offense pretty well. I mean, he is a guy that,
yeah, for sure,
seems like he would thrive in a zone-based offense. I don't know. It's tough. It feels like we face this dilemma every year. When I'm looking at JSN on the big board here, in my head, the smart pick to me is like, okay, go with the offensive line. Receiver's the fun, flashy pick. You can get his jersey. It'll be exciting. If they pick him, I'll have a great reaction, as opposed to an offensive tackle. But build through the trenches. It's smarter with your veteran quarterback, and also a guy like Rodgers, he can squeeze production out of Denzel Mims if he has to. So go with the offensive tackle. That's what I'm leaning. And the way that my board's fallen, I would go with Paris Johnson. The way that your board has fallen, I'd go Broderick Jones. However, it feels very similar to, last year when I was like, well, I really love Sauce, but I just don't see them taking a corner at 4. Just a different caveat to make. When we've learned from Joe Douglas, he's going to take the best player on his board. And Daniel Jeremiah does not have JSN as, I think he has him as, I have to look, but I think it was like 20th best player on his board. But it's hard. 19th. It's hard. The fun pick is JSN. I feel like he would be good. I feel like him coming here with Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers would be exciting. We would look back on this as like, oh, I can't believe we almost passed on this stud receiver. But at the same time,
like if they listened to us with addressing needs last year, or Kayvon Thibodeau would be a Jet right now instead of Sauce.
And so JSN is the in my head is kind of at that Sauce level of like, okay, fun player, really like this player, but no, this doesn't fit the needs of what the Jets do. But it is, Garrett Wilson has sung his praises for a whole year now, and he's probably has Joe Douglas's ears a little bit on JSN. I don't know. To be fun, I kind of want to just go with JSN. So I will. I'll go with JSN. Why not?
All right, I'll go the tackle route.
All right, I figured we'd mix it up.
Broderick Jones for me, JSN for you.
And then I guess maybe Corey Davis is going in that.
I mean, look at the Bengals. Like, they've had so many O-line issues, and they just have a amazing receiver group, and they've been able to overcome it and play really well.
I think what I'm probably going to do. We'll see how this board falls. My thinking is it's probably better to if there's a good tackle here to draft the tackle and sign Ben Jones, because I feel like we can survive at center another year. If they have Ben Jones between the depth that they brought in and Schweitzer and Cologne, I feel like they should be, obviously one of these centers it's more exciting, but they could be fine. If they try to go cheap on tackle and they bring in Fleming, and then you have, 40-year-old Dwayne Brown, mid Cameron Fleming, Becton, who's a wild card, and then Max Mitchell, who's also a bit of a wild card. That's scary for me. So I think if I'm going grocery shopping, I'd be looking for a tackle. But considering I just took JSN, I'm going to try to stick to my roots here of going with the best player available, and we'll see what happens. What's your board looking like?
Yeah, top of the available players here, a lot of linebackers. DeJuan Jones, the tackle, just went off at 41. Not that we needed a tackle, but it's interesting considering, if they get into a scenario like you where you might be looking for him there. John Michael Schmitz, he's taken. He went to Seattle at 37, the center. But all the other centers are here. So based on this board, it would be a reach to take a center. The top players are mostly linebackers, edge rushers here. But I'm going to go grocery shopping. I want that young center. I'm going to let's go with Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin.
How do you weigh Tippmann versus John Michael Schmitz?
I think John Michael Schmitz is just from my perspective, because I like to value things like analytics, athleticism, stuff like that. That's my wheelhouse. And JMS does kind of concern me a little bit because he doesn't have an elite athletic profile. It's kind of below average for a guy who's supposed to go top 50, especially in the explosiveness drills, the broad jump, the vertical, which is stuff the outside zone teams typically value, including the Jets and Joe Douglas. He's pretty average in that stuff. And then his pass protection stats in terms of his pressures allowed was kind of mediocre in that as well. So I don't love him because of those reasons. I trust the film. I've seen a lot of people post film of him, and he looks really good. And I trust that for sure. But just those are some concerns that I have looking at things in the lens that I like to look at them. But yeah, so I don't know if I'm as enthused about him, but then again, what do I know?
That's a spirit. I guess I feel as
put
much
me
as
on ESPN right now. Yeah, it's exactly what they want to hear you say.
I feel as much as I was just railing against the whole grocery shopping, it does make things a hell of a lot easier, because I'm looking at this board and I'm like, damn. I mean, you really need those offensive line reinforcements, and it's like, all right, Matthew Bergeron, Syracuse's own. He's looking at the big board in terms of tackles, and from what I've seen from him, watching him in person, I mean, seems like he'd be a solid fit, but definitely not as much of a sure thing as some of those first round tackles. It would make things hell of a lot easier if the Jets were able to keep their 2 second-round picks. I'll say that, because then I would feel a little bit more
It would
like,
be
okay, look,
really fun right now if we
yeah.
just knew they were gonna have this set of picks with no trade drama. No,
Is there
I'll
any?
take this reality. I want Aaron Rodgers, but I'm just saying it would be
Yeah.
fun.
Well, maybe it's possible. Maybe they would do the pick swap, and then the conditional. They have two sets of conditional picks, and the next year it's like we've said, where it's like, okay, first round if they go to the Super Bowl, second round if they go to playoff, whatever it is, and then the other one based off of if Rodgers plays in 2024. I mean, you could get to a trade package that is valuable. It just seems like the meat of what the Packers can gain from this deal this offseason, and the only incentive to making this trade now and not after June 1st, when it would be cheaper, would be to get one of these second round picks. Because otherwise, the difference from 13 to 15 is, I guess that's there. But, and then also, if you're doing that, I would imagine the Packers would be doing that to get a receiver. So they'd probably be trading up to get JSN. So in which case, I guess you could go a defensive player. I don't know. But it would make things hell of a lot easier if they could keep both these second round picks. But I guess I've stalled enough. I mean, again, if I'm looking best player available, I would probably rather go with the centers. I mean, like, I this is tough. I want to go Tippmann, but it feels like they should go. You know what? I'll stick with the best player available. We're not going grocery shopping. I'll go Tippmann. I'll go JSN and Tippmann, and I guess we're riding out with. Guess we're riding with Becton, Max Mitchell, Dwayne Brown, and
maybe they
count
on that Max Mitchell breakout. That's an underrated possibility you brought up. Like, maybe they're really
he looks bigger.
Not that they wouldn't. Yeah, not that they wouldn't draft a tackle because of him, but maybe they do like him enough to be confident in him taking.
He flashed. He flashed, and he looks.
He did have flashes.
That one video at an Islanders game, he looked bigger to me, because I remember that
I was just happy to see him there, because I know he had his issues were more health concerns than injuries. So just to see him there chugging a beer was nice to see.
Yeah. God, it is tough, though. If they go with the fun pick of JSN or hell, any of the non-tackles, they really pigeonhole themselves, unless something comes out of the blue like David Bakhtiar. Is that even they couldn't?
I don't think so. His contract, right? Yeah, it's too.
I've seen people float that around. Yeah, I've seen people float around, and it sounds fun. Is there? I mean, there are other veteran tackles that they could potentially trade for this weekend, but yeah, seems like if I was a betting man, I'd say tackle in the first round, center in the second round, call it a day, and then they get to day 3 and just take best player available, draft young guys you like. They'll probably take a quarterback, and hopefully that Rodgers trade is done. And I mean,
grocery shopping is in the first 2 rounds. I think that's where you should do it. And then
if you're a win now team, it is.
Right. Like, I think this is a draft where the Jets can do that a little bit, because they did kind of set themselves up to where it's like, okay, it's a good tackle prospect. We're in a spot to get one. Let's maybe push that to the draft instead of, because tackles and free agency wasn't great, and the few that were viable were very expensive. So, I mean, yeah, they're a win now team, and I think you want guys who could help you right away. They're going for maybe 1 year window, possibly 2 with Rodgers. So maybe it is the better move to reach a little bit if you have to get guys who have a better chance of helping you right now.
Yeah, and if you the risk, though, is, as much as I like JSN and he's an exciting player, if you take the swing on the high ceiling guy like that, and he doesn't hit, or he has injury issues or whatever, and your offensive line plan D or whatever we're on at this point isn't really working out to protect your 40-year-old quarterback. It just, there's a lot of pitfalls. So I really do think, again, don't want to go grocery shopping, but their needs line up really well with how the board should fall in terms of the tackles should be there. There should be a tackle there at 13, and there should be a good center there at 42 or 43. So if I was a betting man, I think that's what they'll do. So before we get out of here, though, Michael, I need your guys, your picks. Who is, if you had to choose one tackle, they're all available at 13. Which tackle are you taking? And if they're all available, all the centers are available at 42. Which center are you? I mean, I guess you already kind of gave it away with Tippmann, but which at 13, who is your guy? And we can roast you for all of eternity if he's not that good.
And to counter that, I'm just gonna praise a bunch of different guys at once.
No. We need one. We need one. Who do you want at 13? If they're all available.
My gut is Paris Johnson. That's what my gut is telling me. There are things to like about all of them, but I think just Skoronski's length is concerning, and you definitely see it when you watch it. Like, sometimes guys have short arms or whatever the deficiency is, and you watch them play and it doesn't actually affect them that much. And I'm not saying like he's bad film or can't overcome it and be a good tackle or anything, but you watch him and you can see his arms are short, and there are plays where guys get their hands into him and are able to keep him at bay because of that. So it could be an issue.
Could you imagine if our 2 tackles are him and Becton? Just the biggest tackle and then the smallest
and
tackle
then
on the other
just
side.
the shortest arms. It'd be hilarious. But and then there's also DeJuan Jones in this draft, and he could have 2 Bectons. That's fun / very dangerous.
Yeah,
but,
never again.
I think Paris Johnson just I don't see Douglas going down. Maybe he does. I don't know. But I think Paris Johnson just feels the safest to me. And that's not to say he doesn't have upside either, but just feels like the safest bet.
He feels like the safest bet, but like Jedrick Wills in the 2020 draft, I don't think he's going to be there. I think it's going to be between Broderick Jones or Skoronski.
That was my guy in that tackle class. I'll admit that, and he's been pretty good. Worst has been the best, but I was a huge Jedrick
I liked
Wills.
I'm a huge flex, but I was
right.
big on the worst trend. But at the same time,
for sure.
But also at the same time, as soon as the Jets draft somebody, I do change tune immediately. Like I was pretty hard team fields that draft process, and then as soon as it became evident the Jets were not going to take him, we were Team Wilson in this pod, baby. So I can waffle if with the best of them, but I would say right now I agree with you. Paris Johnson probably number 1. I don't think he's going to be available though, so I'll go with Broderick Jones. I think that's. I mean, I know I asked you who your number 1 guy is. I guess I'm more leaning into predictions of what I actually think will happen. I'll say the Jets take Broderick Jones. And
I agree. That would be my prediction.
I think that just makes the most sense. The athletic profile. Becton, even as much of a wild card as he is this year, I'm excited to watch him. I actually do believe that he's going to have a good season. But are the Jets going to even be able to re-sign him after the season? They're probably not getting that 5th-year option. So that's another reason that they should take a tackle here. And Jones brings you that athleticism, that toughness that Becton has as well. And so having 2 of them on the same offensive line, in addition to AVT and how maybe Lakin can get his shit together, you build a really nasty offensive line up front, and then whoever they get at center. So I think Broderick Jones, that would be my prediction. I'd be very happy with that pick as well. I think he seems maybe a little less safe than Paris Johnson, but also I think in this offense, especially if you're trying to establish yourself as a run first, 12 personnel, ground and pound type of offense, I think Jones makes a lot of sense for them. So that would be my official prediction. And then as far as the center at 42 or 43, whatever one they have, he said Sidman, so I'll go John Michael Schmitz. Why not?
A quick fun fact for you with Broderick Jones. This will make everyone feel good about this potential pick. So I'm looking at his mock draftable profile, and his number 6 closest comparison among all-time tackle prospects. It's a guy from 2006. Do you want to guess who it is?
2006, DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
Yes.
Nice.
So there you go. Closely comparing to the brick.
Nice. I like that. It does feel similar though. A similar draft of the Jets doubling on a center and a tackle, like 2006. I think you should see a similar draft this time around. And hell, that was one of the best Jets draft classes ever, and it's not a flashy one. But if you're able to get, I'm not expecting these guys to be brick and mangle, but if they're able to get long-term offensive line studs with these 2 picks, this draft could be as valuable as the last one, even without nearly the same amount of hype or high value picks. So I'm very excited for this week. And I think this podcast actually got me more excited for the draft now that we really got to dive into it. I am fascinated to see what they do at 13, how the board falls, which tackles are available. Do they take a gamble and go elsewhere? Probably not. I think they're going to go with the tackle. Which tackle do they go with? And then the Rodgers drama, will it finally happen when we get to the second round? Which are they going to go with the center, or are they going to go sign Ben Jones and draft somebody else? It's fascinating to watch Joe Douglas moving up and down the board. Which day 3 guys will they go after to fill out the talent of this roster? I mean, it is really nice. I know we joke about the hype of this draft not being the same as last year, but it is really nice to have a team that doesn't feel like they're entirely relying on the draft to fill every single hole, and that they can kind of focus more. Obviously they have some holes, but on day 3, they can really focus on just trying to find the best young guys to build out your culture and develop a pipeline of talent, which is really not a position the Jets have been in any draft that I can remember these last few years. I mean, you're always doing it, but just different when you feel like you have something to play for this season, that you're not going to have to force these guys to start immediately, that you can, develop them. I'm excited. So I'm very excited for the rest of this week. We will have 3 podcasts coming out immediately after each day of the draft. So be on the lookout for that. We did the Thomas Morstead interview last week. Check that out. That was a fun time. Really like doing those. So we're making sure to do quite a few more of those this offseason. We'll get a little bit more consistent as the weeks go on. It's a very fun offseason, a very fun season upcoming, but it all starts with this draft. I feel like once the draft is here, then you can really start to envision what the 2023 Jets are going to look like, and that's exciting. So you can follow us at 2AJ Pod on Twitter, myself at Ben W. Blessington, Michael at Michael_Nania. Go to JetsXFactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. Subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube. We post all the podcasts there. Please, if you can, rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. That helps out the pod a ton. And with that said, Michael, last thoughts?
I mean, should we discuss the Cardinals uniforms? This is usually our uniform segment here.
Actually, before we get into the Cardinals, I want to bring up the point I made to you when we were watching the Knicks game earlier. Has anybody else pointed out the fact that the Jets pretty much just completely ripped off the Knicks logo when they redid the logo in 2019? It's just New York above the team name with the sport or the ball of the sport right below it, and then a shape behind it, the sport ball below it. But it's like New York, Jets or Knicks, basketball or football, and then
there's a shape in the background.
Yes, and it's the same logo. So it did make me like the Jets.
Only on Cool Your Jets podcast.
I like the Knicks logo, but I don't like the Jets logo. Why is that? Is it just the nostalgia?
I think the Knicks logo is just the letters are emboldened, kind of looks like a skyscraper, and like the triangle in the background, it's almost like a superhero kind of thing. I don't know. The Knicks, there's more personality to the Knicks logo.
Yeah, that's true.
Jets logo is like New York Jets. That's what we're
getting there. Well, you saw Garrett say that he's going to wear 17 again this year and then switch to 5, which kind of makes me feel like the probable reason he's doing that is because it's expensive to switch your number. You got to buy out all the stock, and so it's cheaper if you do it a year in advance. That's probably why he's doing it, but also this is the last year the Jets have to wear these current uniforms. If they have a great year with Rodgers, I wouldn't be surprised if this is their uniforms until Rodgers leaves, but it does kind of feel like the Jets will update these unis. I don't know if they'll overhaul them completely, but I could see some variations maybe to the logo, maybe introducing the 80s throwback this year, making that the permanent logo in 20. Who knows? But you asked me the Cardinals logo.
I'd be open to. Well, we'll get into that in 2 seconds. It kind of relates to what I'm about to say, but I'd be open to a change. I mean, I'd defend these jerseys a lot. Or
the Gase and Zach Wilson unis.
I think they're better than people realize, but they're not as they could be, let's say, cleaner. I think there are elements of it that are maybe a little overdone and don't look as pristine as you would like them to. So I think it could be you could get some elements of the what they were going for with these, like maybe sleeker, more modern, these like cool elements that pop out. Get some of that, but also some of the old school, some of the more traditional striping and numbers and things like that. So I think you could combine those two elements better. That would be my goal with the new Jets uniform.
Yeah, I think you just change the logo and clean up the unis a little bit. But overall, I mean, I don't hate the contrail.
I like the concept of that. Yeah, like the whatever you want to call them, contrail, the wings on the shoulders, whatever. I like the concept. It's just sometimes that is the part of it that I think drags it down. So it can be done better.
Yeah, on the offensive lineman when the jerseys get all wrinkled and then the contrail is like pointing.
A big squiggly line pointing down. But
nobody made those jerseys look as bad as Darnold did.
Yeah, because he had the sleeve jerseys, right? So
I think Rodgers is going to have them too.
That. Yeah, I don't know. But I don't think he's going to look great in these uniforms. Yeah. To be honest, we've discussed this. I think if the Jets were focused on
they're winning,
Derek Carr was the right pick.
That's true. But if they're winning, I think we're going to be pretty happy.
I don't know. It might kind of ruin the whole thing.
I don't even want the Jets to win. Look like shit.
What did you think? I think the Cardinals, they speaking of what I just said, like trying to combine modern and classic elements. I think the Cardinals are another example of Nike making a uniform that's just overly modern. It's just completely clean. It has like no personality to it. It's an upgrade for them.
Got the little flakes in the helmet.
Yeah, I do like that. I like that part of it. But this is an upgrade. Their old uniforms are one of the worst in the league. I couldn't wait to see new uniforms for them, but I'm a little disappointed. It's just too clean. It's like
The white
which I
ones are cool.
but I think there's potential to be a little more
Yeah,
creative.
I know that the
Sometimes teams
creativity
don't exercise that.
the creativity is really lacking. And the other thing is that Nike is doing the let's put the home team name across the front of the jersey,
Yeah.
which I guess is a
Every
modern look.
team. Is there a team that hasn't done that in their uniform overall recently?
There's been a few, the Vikings, the Seahawks, whatever, but it started with the Browns.
I mean, that's
Then
pretty far back now. We're talking like
okay, if we're
past
talking
5
like
years or
the
so.
last Titans, they
That's
didn't do that with
true.
the Titans. They didn't do
Although
that with
even that is
the
like 2018, right?
yeah.
The Falcons did it. Cardinals,
I get it.
Jets.
Okay, the Jets, I get it because
I guess the Rams,
New York
Chargers didn't
is
do
a
it.
brand. People, even if they don't
But
like
the
football or
Bengals,
whatever,
those teams did
okay,
it.
you should keep naming off uniform revans.
I'm looking at all the helmets on my
Oh,
wall, so
okay. New York is a brand though, so it made sense to why you would want to put it across a
I
jersey.
agree.
People
There's
who
nothing
aren't
cooler than New York written out.
right, and ATL. Okay, that is a bit of a brand itself, but like Arizona. My parents live in Arizona. I spend plenty of time out there. I love Arizona, but that's not like who the fuck is walking around
Yeah.
trying to wear Arizona across their chest?
Even
It's
like the
not.
Suns, like their PHX jerseys, I feel like that's cooler than Arizona.
I think these unis will look good on the field, though. I will say that. Like I think the white ones are I mean, I like the black ones too. It's just that they don't have, like you said, they need one more. There needs one more thing on that uniform to just make it feel Cardinals. But once they're on the field with the helmets on, I feel the white and black ones are pretty cool. The red ones with Arizona, whatever, but they look too much like the Jets with that Arizona across the chest. All right.
Yeah.
I guess we're done. That's it. That's the uniform talk taking us right into draft week. Thank you everybody for listening. We will be back following day one of the draft, so it'll come out probably 1 a.m. or something. But be on the lookout for that. A lot of great content coming your way from Jets X Factor this week. So hope everybody has a great week. Very excited about this draft. Stay tuned. Go Jets.